Welcome to the deep dive. We cut through the noise to give you what you need on complex topics. And today, we're tackling something really critical: data security. We've gathered a lot of material here, really comprehensive stuff on how organizations, well, build their digital defenses, especially focusing on sensitive info like EPHI, that's electronic protected health information. So our goal here is basically a shortcut for you. We want to pull out the core strategies, figure out the biggest threats, and map the rules like PPI that say how data has to be protected. This isn't just about tech, right? It's about how organizations stay resilient.
That's spot on. Security, particularly in healthcare, it goes way beyond just, installing some software. We're going to talk about that layered defense strategies, starting with the basic goals and moving to the actual controls, administrative, technical needed to keep things secure day to day. Get this framework, and you pretty much understand the whole field.
Okay, great. Let's start with the basics then. The bedrock standard for measuring security seems to be this thing called the CIA triad. Can you unpack that for us? What do confidentiality, integrity, and availability actually mean in practice, especially with something sensitive like EPHI?
Right, the CIA triad. Confidentiality, integrity, and availability. They're the absolute fundamentals. If any one of these is breached, well, you've got a security incident on your hands. So confidentiality is probably the easiest one. It's basically ensuring only authorized people or systems can access the data. Simple as that. But in healthcare, confidentiality isn't just about stopping hackers from, say, Russia. It's also making sure an employee, even one with credentials, can't just casually look up their neighbor's medical record, or a celebrity's.
That's a really important point. The threat isn't always external. It can be someone already inside.
Exactly. It often is. Now, integrity. This one's a bit trickier than people think. It's not just about data being corrupted. It guarantees the data is complete, accurate, consistent, and up to date. Always, throughout its whole life cycle. The sources we looked at are very clear. This means data consistency so it stays unchanged unless properly altered, and data definition. Every piece of data needs a clear meaning.
Okay, so let me get this straight. It's not enough to keep data secret. If, say, a system accidentally changes a patient's medication dose and doesn't log it properly, that's an integrity failure.
Precisely. And that could have devastating consequences in a medical context.
Yeah.
Patient safety is directly linked to data integrity.
Makes sense.
And the third one is availability. This is pretty straightforward. Making sure the data and the systems holding it are actually accessible to the right user when and where they need it. If a doctor can't access a patient's allergy info in an emergency because the server's down, that's a huge availability failure. This really relies on solid disaster planning, backups, that sort of thing.
Right. So confidentiality, integrity, availability, that's the ideal state, the goal, CIA. But achieving that ideal means building layers of defense because those goals are constantly under threat. Let's shift to those threats now. And the sources seem to agree. The biggest weakness is often us, people.
Yeah, the sources are really stark on this. Humans are unfortunately the biggest liability. We focus a lot on sophisticated cyber attacks, but honestly, most breaches have an internal component. Sometimes it's malicious, sometimes it's just accidental. These human-caused threats, they fall into about 5 main buckets. You've got everything from genuine unintentional mistakes, someone deletes the wrong file, or there's a typo in a patient ID. That's actually a huge category.
Wow. Okay.
Then you have people abusing their access. They can see the data, but they share it when they shouldn't. Then there's accessing systems for spite or profit, maybe trying to commit fraud or steal identities. And of course, you have classic intruders trying to get in physically or digitally. And finally, the really nasty one: vengeful employees or maybe even outsiders deliberately attacking systems.
Hold on. If unintentional mistakes are such a big category, maybe even number one internally, does that mean too much focus goes on stopping the, evil mastermind hacker? Should companies be spending more on just better training, clearer interfaces, making systems harder to mess up accidentally?
That's definitely a key tension in security strategy. You absolutely have to address both. But yes, the evidence suggests that good training, good system design, usability, they can give you a massive return on investment in terms of reducing breaches. But you obviously can't ignore malicious actors, internal or external, which is why monitoring is also critical. And, a lot of external attacks actually succeed by tricking people, not by breaking code.
Which brings us straight to social engineering. That's the really insidious stuff, right? Using psychology, manipulating trust.
Exactly. Why bother cracking complex encryption if you can just trick someone into giving you the password? The most common type we see is phishing. You get that fake email, looks legitimate, maybe from your bank or IT department, asking you to click a link and verify your account.
We've all seen those.
Right. But then there's spear phishing, which is way more dangerous. Here, the attacker does their homework. They target a specific person, find out their job title, maybe who their boss is. Then they craft a very specific personal-sounding email, like an urgent request that seems to come from management. Much harder to spot.
That's chilling. And then there are the physical tricks, too.
Oh, yeah, like baiting. Someone leaves an infected USB stick lying around, maybe labeled confidential salaries 2024. They're betting someone's curiosity will make them plug it into a company computer. And it often works.
Or my personal favorite,
Oh, cool.
or least favorite, tailgating,
Ah, yes.
where someone just physically follows an authorized person through a secure door. Maybe they're carrying coffee, is looking flustered, exploiting politeness.
It's surprisingly effective. Our natural inclination to be helpful becomes a security flaw. Okay, moving quickly past the human element, though it's huge, we also have non-human threats. Environmental stuff. You mentioned Hurricane Harvey earlier. A natural disaster can wipe out data centers. That's a massive availability problem. Even just a power outage can be critical in healthcare.
Right.
And then, of course, there's malware, malicious software. You know the names, but think about their impact on CIA. Ransomware locks your data. That's an availability attack. Pay up or you don't get it back. Trojan horses, rootkits. They sneak in disguised as something else and aim to take control. That hits confidentiality and integrity.
So many ways things can go wrong.
Which is why the defense needs to be robust.
Okay, so we have the goals, CIA, we know the threats people, environment, malware. Now let's talk defense, building that fortress. The sources list a lot of components, but let's zero in on controlling who gets access to what, especially for EPHI.
Right. Access control is foundational. It's all about limiting access. The core principle here is least privilege. Basically, employees should only have access to the minimum data they absolutely need to do their job. Nothing more.
And how is that implemented? Are there different models?
Yeah, there are three main models typically used. The most common is probably role-based access control, or RBAC. Access is tied to your job title. So a nurse gets certain permissions, a billing clerk gets different ones, a doctor another set. Makes sense for large organizations. Then there's user-based access control, UBAC. Access is granted specifically to you, the individual user.
Okay.
But maybe the most sophisticated, especially for sensitive areas, is context-based access control, CBAC.
Context-based, what does the context add?
It adds layers. It looks at who you are, but also where you are and when you're trying to access the data. So think about a hospital again. A doctor might be allowed to see very sensitive patient notes, but only when they're physically on the hospital network in the relevant ward, and maybe only during their shift hours. If they try that same access from a cafe across town at midnight, CBA should block it, even if the password is correct. It really tightens confidentiality based on circumstance.
That's clever. So once we've defined who should have access, we need to be sure the person logging in is who they say they are. Authentication.
Exactly. And this is where everyone listening can really apply these principles to their own lives too. The sources break authentication down into three types or factors. First is something you know, your password, your PIN. The key takeaway here, length beats complexity. A long, memorable passphrase is much, much stronger than a short, complicated one with symbols and numbers.
Good tip. Length over complexity.
Second factor, something you have. This is a physical object, like a smart card, a USB security key, or maybe your phone getting a one-time code and OTP.
Right.
And the third factor, something you are. That's biometrics. Fingerprints, facial recognition, retinal scans, palm prints. Unique biological traits.
Okay, no, have, are.
And the gold standard now, even for your personal email or banking, is two-factor authentication, or 2FA. It just means combining any two of those factors, like a password plus a code sent to your phone. How? It dramatically increases security. Simple, cheap, everyone should use it. Protects confidentiality.
Absolutely. Okay, so beyond just controlling entry, there are technical tools working in the background, right?
Right.
Protecting data as it moves or just sits there.
Yes, definitely. You need to protect data both in transit, when it's moving across networks, and at rest when it's stored on drives. The main tool for this is encryption. It basically scrambles the data into an unreadable format using complex keys. If someone steals encrypted data but doesn't have the key, it's useless to them.
Okay. And what about managing the traffic, like the gatekeeper for the network?
That's where firewalls come in. They act like a filter, examining data packets coming in and going out. They enforce rules about what traffic is allowed through and what gets blocked based on security policies.
And watching for trouble already inside.
For that, you have intrusion detection systems, or IDS. These systems monitor network and system activity, looking for suspicious patterns or known attack signatures. Think of them as burglar alarms for the network. They flag potential problems for investigation.
Got it. So we have the theory, the threats, the controls. But what forces organizations, especially in healthcare, to actually do all this? That brings us to the rules. We're talking about the EEPA security rule plus the HITech updates. These legally mandate security for electronic protected health information. And the sources stress that this rule is designed to be flexible, scalable, and technology neutral. What does that mean in practice?
It means the rule sets the security standards that must be met, but not necessarily the how. So a giant hospital system and a small doctor's office both have to comply with high pay, but they can use different technologies and procedures appropriate to their size and complexity. The rule doesn't say you must use Firewall X. It says you must have mechanisms to protect against unauthorized access. That flexibility is key. Now, the security rule itself is divided into 5 main categories of safeguards. And arguably the most foundational, the one that shapes the whole security culture, is administrative safeguards.
Administrate, so not tech, but policies,
Sure.
procedures.
Exactly. It's the management side of security. Policies, procedures, how you manage the human and organizational aspects. This includes mandating a security management process. Organizations have to perform ongoing risk analysis, figuring out where their vulnerabilities are. They need to do impact analysis, what happens if a breach occurs, and implement risk management strategies to reduce those risks. It's a continuous cycle.
So it's legally required proactive management, not just reacting to breaches.
Correct. And part of that management involves clear accountability. The administrative safeguards require assigning security responsibility. Usually this means having a designated chief security officer or CSO, someone whose job it is to oversee the entire security program.
Makes sense. And where does availability fit into these administrative rules? We talked about disaster planning earlier.
Right here, the contingency plan is a major administrative safeguard. It mandates having plans for emergencies. This includes a business continuity plan, how do critical functions keep running during a disruption, and a disaster recovery plan, how do you get systems and data back online after a disaster. These plans directly support the A and CIA. Other administrative safeguards cover workforce security, things like security training for all employees, having clear sanctions if they violate policies, and critically, procedures for terminating access when someone leaves the organization.
Okay, that's a lot under the administrative umbrella. How do organizations prove they're actually following all these rules and procedures? How do they check for suspicious activity?
Accountability is key. That comes down to monitoring and evidence. This relies heavily on forensics. The whole process of identifying, analyzing, preserving data related to a potential security incident, and the foundation for almost all digital forensics, the audit trail or audit log.
It's a log of everything that happens.
Pretty much. A detailed, ideally unchangeable record of who accessed what system, what data, when, from where. It's crucial for investigating breaches or misuse. And one of the most fascinating things I found in the source material was how organizations actively use these logs through something called trigger events.
Trigger events, what are those?
They're specific actions or situations predefined by the organization that automatically flag an instance of data access for immediate review by security personnel, even if the person accessing the data technically has permission to do so.
So it's like certain access patterns are inherently suspicious.
Exactly. It's a way to proactively look for potential internal misuse, enforcing confidentiality against the insider threat we talked about. The examples given are very telling, accessing the records of VIPs, celebrities, politicians, board members that often triggers a review, accessing records of employees who were recently terminated, that's another common one, but probably the most frequent trigger. An employee accessing the medical record of their spouse or another family member,
Wow.
or accessing records related to highly sensitive diagnoses like HIV/AIDS status, substance abuse treatment, things like that. These trigger events don't necessarily mean wrongdoing, but they guarantee a closer look. They bypass routine checks and go straight to security audit.
That's really quite something. It shows just how deep the monitoring has to go to truly enforce these rules, especially confidentiality against all threats. What a comprehensive overview. We started with the basic definition of security CIA, then navigated the minefield of threats, especially human ones, and ended up looking at the layers of defense, both technical and, crucially, administrative, all mandated by regulations.
Yeah, and I think the main takeaway really is that security isn't just an IT department problem. It's an organizational management challenge. You can have the best tech in the world, but if your policies, your training, your risk assessments, and administrative safeguards aren't strong, you're still wide open, especially to those common human errors or simple curiosity.
A really crucial point, and thinking about that monitoring, Those trigger events are quite revealing, aren't they? If healthcare security systems are already designed to flag when an employee looks at, say, their spouse's record, what might that suggest about the future of workplace monitoring in other fields? How much of what we might consider personal activity could eventually become a trigger event for review in any professional setting? Something to think about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you on the next one.